Hussbus bus stop.
JP Hussey here, owner of the Hussey Team Mortgage Advisors, with this week's
Hussbus bus stop.
All right, let's lock in. If you own a home now, all right, you already have or will be very soon bombarded with emails, maybe calls, texts, all right, from mortgage companies, from lenders, from brokerages to try to get you to refinance. Okay? We've done videos like this before, but I'm going to get a little bit more granular. All right? The big one is whoever you're paying your mortgage payment to, the servicer of your loan. Okay? They're the ones that bought the rights to service your loan, collect payments, and all that jazz. All right? They're not necessarily good at actually doing loans. All right, some are, some aren't, whatever it is. There's people in my position that own brokerages that aren't good either, whatever, right? But they could be people calling you from a call center with a script and just trying to tell you what to do, and they have to hit numbers. They have to hit numbers. They got to hit numbers, okay? And volume, all right? So you may start seeing this. So I want to give you a couple things to look out for to protect yourself, and maybe a couple things to make you a little bit more dangerous to see if a refinance makes sense, because it doesn't always make sense. All right. So the first thing, they show you everything's about rate. They say it's not, okay, but that's the catchy thing, right? The bait you in, okay. They show you a lower rate that looks sexy, all right, but what you want to be careful of are a couple things. They may be charging a lot of points or fees for that rate. Not saying they aren't, or they are, but they could be. So you want to see how many points or fees are connected to that rate. Remember, if you go to our website, thehusseyteam.com/rates, maybe Lindsay will put it up here, we talk about how rates actually work. You can have any rate you want. The lower the rates cost more, the higher the rates cost less, right? All makes sense. It's a big sliding scale like a stock, all right? So if you see a very low rate, be careful of how much you're paying for that rate. So that's something to look at. And we would always happily look at an offer that you get, and if it's much better than anything that we can do, which I kind of highly doubt, we'll tell you to go there. I don't have time to sell you on this and that. And it's all, we're going to tell you go there. I have a client today showed me something. I'm like, let me see it before we do anything. Okay? So be careful there. Also, with lower terms, like a 15-year mortgage, 30-year, 20-year, whatever it is, lower term, right? 15's lower than 30, the rates are usually lower, all right? So that could be another thing. Wow, look how low that rate is. But remember, if it's a 15-year, it's consolidated in to pay it off quicker, so the payment's going to be higher, right? 30-year is made so things are more affordable and spread out, so it's easier on a monthly basis, all right? So sometimes lower rates, they show you a 15-year with maybe not the taxes and insurance in the payment escrowed, so the payment looks a lot lower, right? So you got to be careful there. You have to look at what you're doing. Again, I'll happily look at anything and tell you what to do, right? But you want to be careful there, all right? And that goes back to the escrow thing. We are recommending not escrowing taxes and insurance. You can't always do it, right? If you're a first-time home buyer and you're not putting enough down, sometimes you can't do it. FHA, you can't do it. But you want to be careful there of seeing the payment and seeing if it includes your taxes and insurance. That's how you can look at things apples to apples to see what makes sense, all right? So those are some of the things to look out for, all right, on a regular rate and term refinance. Remember, there's cash out refinance, all types of things. But that's on a regular rate and term, which means I just want to lower my payment, all right? Now, some things to think about. Doesn't always make sense to refinance, right? Pennsylvania, we've said this before, has some of the higher costs, all right? So you need to look at some break-even type situations, okay? I would say a point lower than where you're at in Pennsylvania, maybe a little bit less, maybe sometimes a half a point on a regular rate and term. Remember, cash out really doesn't matter. We're doing all types of crazy plans. But that usually makes sense in Pennsylvania, about a point or so, okay? Now, if you think that you're going to sell your home, right, sell it, get rid of the mortgage, all right, in less than a year, 2 years, maybe, depending on the situation, the break evens, right? You want to be careful there as well, all right? Because if you're rolling costs into the loan, there's a break even with the lower monthly payments and the lower rate and the interest of when you break even. Because if you refi, you're losing for a little bit, there's no doubt. Maybe on a monthly basis, right, you're doing better, but longer term, you're going to be losing for a little bit in the grand scheme of things. You have to be careful there. Because if you roll costs in, right, so hear me out here. You roll a bunch of costs in, and the break even for you to start winning, let's say, is 2 years, all right? Then you sell in 1 year, right? Your balance is going to be higher than where you were. So when you go to sell, you're going to get less money in your pocket, less proceeds. That's why there's a break even. You have to see where that matrix kind of connects. So you want to be careful there as well. And that's what you want to think about when you're refining. That's usually the biggest thing, right? How long do I think, you can't predict the future. How long do I think I'm going to keep this house? Now, you may buy a bigger home and keep that as a rental. That's great reason to refinance. Refinance now as a primary. Then later, if you have to turn it into a rental after a year or so, 2 years, that's kind of that house hacking thing. That could be a good decision. But if you're getting rid of it in less than 2 years, year, whatever it is, it may not make sense to do any type of refinancing because your balance is going to be higher. You're going to get less money when you sell. All right. So these are the things, excuse me, these are the things you want to think about before you refi. It's not just get me a lower rate, right? It could not make sense. You got to be careful out there, excuse me again, of people that maybe don't understand this. I'm not saying they're bad people, right? But they're not doing things in your best interest, all right? And they're baiting you. They're making things look sexy, all right? You got to look at it a little bit more. And you have to have some trust with the people you're dealing with to tell you no if it doesn't make sense, right? If someone's yesing you to death, right, and it feels weird, it may not make sense. Be careful, but the Fed did cut their Fed fund rates by a quarter point yesterday. Rates kind of got better. We're in a great spot with rents. We're seeing people buying houses left and right. It's craziness out there. It's awesome. So just prepare yourself and breathe. Stay calm, because it can be chaos, and it's going to be chaos when rates come down. And that'll be another video later on of how to handle that. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Hussbus, bus stop.